Good morning, everybody. Hi, this is Dr. Sujata Nair from Anatta University. For those who don't know about us, Anatta is an uber luxury facility which treats those suffering from addiction to alcohol, drugs, and prescription medication. We also give equal importance to the family, wherein they suffer as much as the person who is dependent on the substance. So we focus on a separate family therapy for the family of the person who's suffering from addiction, the loved ones, the friends, the workers, co-workers, employees, etc. In the 16 plus years that we have been in this field, it has been our experience that sexuality plays a huge role in addiction and is highly impacted by substance use. So here we have our mentor, Dr. Rajiv Jerajani, who is a psychiatrist by profession, has been in the field of treatment of addiction since 40 plus years and equal number of years in the field of psychiatry. He is one of the very, very few psychiatrists that I know who behove and who encourage a non-medical treatment program for addiction as what Anatta does. It's a voluntary non-medical process which uses eclectic modes of counseling, meditation, and various alternate therapies in its treatment process. Dr. Jerajani has been our mentor since inception. He has likewise also mentored several non-medical rehabilitation processes across the country. He has been primary policy making of the government. He has been a major guide to the government of India. He has worked at many local, regional, national, and international platforms in the field of addiction, in increasing awareness, in encouraging non-medical treatment, in encouraging and enhancing the need for compassion and dignity in the treatment towards those suffering from addiction, because they are not bad people, they are only ill individuals who require treatment. And coming back to our mood understanding, that we treat the individual and not the substance, which is of primary importance in the field. So coming back to sexuality, let us deep dive into this subject, which we are dividing into a two-part series, wherein in the first part today, we will be dealing with the physiological and the pathological aspects of sex and sexuality. Sex and sexuality being a very basic human need and a huge subject which is not spoken about very openly. We at Anatta treat issues related to sexuality in a very open dialogue we have with our clients, wherein all these issues are dealt with. So coming back to Dr. Jerajani, welcome, sir. Welcome, and thank you for being with us today. So let us get down to the nitty-gritties of it. So this episode, as we said, is on the physiological and the pathological aspects of sex and sexuality. And the following episode will be in detail and extensively on addiction and how addiction impacts sexuality and how it affects a person's sobriety and the relapse. So coming back to Dr. Jerajani, let us first look at what is sexuality.
A very interesting question. You are asking me to define what is Mahabharata in one sentence. Now, sexuality is something which is normal, natural. It is inborn in all living species with the basic instinct. One of the fundamental signs of any living species is to propagate. So sexuality primarily is something which is inborn. 90% of the time, people are inhibited, at least in our country or the eastern region, and it is not discussed openly. However, after change of socio-cultural value systems, I'm happy that now at least people are talking and discussing about it. However, still there are a hell of a lot number of people who are inhibited in discussion when it comes to sexuality. So when we say sexuality means what? Sex and sexuality, these are two different concepts. As you said, that what we are talking about physiological and pathological, I would go one step further that psychological component or spiritual component also exists. The essential
Yes.
component which we are looking at is that is it natural or unnatural? Now, this is a $1 million question. That people are saying that what is natural, what are the rules, regulations, these are all social effects on the concept of sexuality. The funny part is that nobody wants to talk about sexuality in public. Everybody is doing sex, there is no question. All species are doing, whether it is cats, dogs, human beings. The different of perceptions or the concept of sexuality, it is developed over a period of time. So sex is something which is natural, which is normal, which is pleasurable, and it also has function of reproduction. Now that brings only two criteria: that there is something which is reproductive component, and there is something which recreational components. So we should look at it openly because it is one of the biological functions. Like I ask normally, the question is that which is the biological functions where you have absolute control and you can stop on your own? Can you stop breathing? Can you stop sleeping? Can you stop eating? You stop shitting? No. So it is only people who say that no, my sex life is over. Let's not go there as of now.
Mm.
But sexuality is something normal. There is nothing right or wrong about it. Interestingly, there are no rules and regulations. But
Mm.
sexuality per se is an issue which is related to relationships. So please try and understand that there is the two people, if they knowingly and voluntarily relate with each other, is something which is law of nature.
Mm.
All right. So that's how I look at
Yes.
it.
Okay. Yes, sir. Another thing is that, see, as where sex and sexuality is concerned, how does it evolve from childhood? Because this basic understanding is also missing in society. And many
Right.
times, infants and children are often scolded at or about touching their private parts, touching their genitals out of curiosity in infancy. So, how would you elaborate and please share about how sexuality develops since childhood?
Well, we did talk about this part of the story that it is natural, right?
Yes.
Now, if you look at the science component, that it is a cell from the father and cell from mother, they unite, and depending on the Y chromosome exchange which takes place, is the man or a woman. That is what the
Yeah.
sexuality concept is. The point is that it doesn't stop there. That is only the physical component of it. Subsequently, after birth, the child learns, and the evolution of sexual concepts, apart from the natural instinctual relationships, are learned to some extent. Then, as he grows into adult, the things will change. And then, of course, with the social perceptions, with the interest, attractions, developments, friends, relationships, they happen. The question is that we are looking at what? The sexuality is not reproductive component which we are looking when in childhood. The child does not understand when he is born that is male or a female. So it's the parent. अभी आपके घर में बेटा हुआ तो पेड़ा मिलता है और बेटी हुई तो बर्फी मिलती है. Well, it's the social training which happens with the sociocultural patterns.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
For males, it is much simpler. For females, it is different. The question is that right or wrong? And as you said, that why, in early 2 years old child, he gets erection. Hello, 2 to 3 years old child gets erection, but that is a
Hmm.
physiological component at
Yes.
that time. But as the child grows, the mind develops, the sexuality develops. You asked a very interesting question because the great teacher of mine, which I followed for almost 14 years, Sigmund Freud, he
Hmm.
described the sexuality in terms of oral phase, anal phase, phallic phase. So the evolution of that, the development of sexuality is a process. It's not an event. And
Yes.
basic parameters remains the same, but for the physiological changes which you see in the different genders. And that's about all. Why people are saying when children touch their private parts and, you know, parents scold them,
Hmm.
it depends on the parents. The point is that if most of the time, you are going into chapter of learning. Now, when you learn something, you learn because the first thing with society teaches you is to say no. The child
Yes.
also learns no first and yes later.
Hmm.
So the question is that for everything which is not approved by the parents, they are going to say no.
Hmm.
So, depending on the basic inputs, understanding, communication with the child, even if it is a 3 years old, I might sound harsh, but let's say the small 3 years baby, you have a wonderful house, and he stands there and does susu. What will you do? So you will say, "Hey, don't do this."
Hmm.
Scold him. Fine. Again, next day he came and did the same thing. What are you going to do? So again, you will scold him and maybe you will spank him.
Hmm.
After that, what will you do if he does on third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day? And after that, it so happens that he grew up to communicate. And he says, "You are telling me not to do it, but you are not telling me where to do it." Now, this is what I
Yes.
mean communications. Most of the time, this should not be done, is the concept of parents, our superego in terms of psychology,
Hmm.
that this should
Hmm.
be done and this should not be done.
Right.
That is where the and if you believe in God, well, I am not a religious person. I am a very I believe in some forces of nature which are controlling. So when it comes to that, I believe God made one mistake.
Hmm.
I may be punished for my blasphemy, as people tell me, but it says that the organs of generation and organs of excretions are together. There is a physical, proximity. Now, excretion, as
Yes.
understood, is to throw out things from the body which are not
Hmm.
required. Now, by simple, you know, conditioning, that if he is passing urine, you say no, yes, because it is not to be done here. But you don't tell him not to pass urine. But if he comes naked in without clothes in the drawing room, yeah, puppy shame, shame. This is what the response is. Or as you
Yes.
rightly said, that touching the genital, he says, "Bish, don't do it." And all kinds of threats are given. It is going to affect the child over a period of time. The question is
Yes.
that the fact remains that it's a natural growth process. Nobody is teaching you. 90% of the people don't study the literature on sexuality.
Yes. They are not
So
aware of it. They are
they're
not
not
aware
aware.
of the literature available.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And so that is also, there is so much taboo around speaking about it that most teenagers, male or female, when they enter puberty and they are confused about what these hormones which have started entering into their system, which are being created, and what these raging hormones do to their mind and body is so havoc creating that it creates a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and a lot of confusion in their minds, young minds, as to what is happening inside them. Why am I feeling attracted to this girl? Or why am I liking the opposite gender where I used to dislike them earlier as children? So it would be great if you could elaborate on what is the right viewpoint or right way of approaching kids who are entering puberty, or what should be spoken to them, and what is the
Right.
impact of all this confusion on their psyche as they are growing up.
Uh, uh, I agree. See, my point is that as I mentioned earlier, that people were not talking about sexuality, but now they are talking about sexuality. Say, take example, the children who are in kindergarten are now given education in terms of what is a good touch and a bad touch, and which I
Yes,
appreciate a lot. The question
that's
is
great.
that if the system is changing, then that yes, awareness will come. I might sound radical, but people have told me on my statements that thank God HIV came, people started talking about sex.
Hmm.
But children education, the basic principle in helping or shaping children's behavior is to use very simple language, being very honest about communication in the language which they understand. It is as simple as that. The point is, at times you may use educational tools like pictorial or something like that, which little grown up children. But the younger generation, you see, it doesn't work that you do something nice, you get reward, and you do something bad, you get punishment. No,
Hmm.
people, it's a normal phenomena, it is bound to happen. The hormones which are there, whether they are testosterones, progesterones, or estrogens, that is a specific gender which we are talking about. But in terms of sexuality, well, issues are more or less the same. And as you rightly said, that how do you know that the child is going to be in puberty? I have
Hmm.
seen one hell of a lot number of children that there was no communication, and the first day when menarche takes place, the child, female child, starts bleeding, and she is scared because she doesn't know, and it is misinterpreted as injury.
Hmm.
Now, previously, what in earlier generation, what we were seeing is that puberty date was late. Today, it has become younger.
Yes.
I used to see earlier, 14, 15 years of age, they start with periods, and children, female, nowadays it is anywhere between 9 to 12, it starts. So the
Yes.
question still is, it is a matter of communication and preparing the child.
Yes.
It is more than often children have great amount of curiosity. Oh, trust me, the current generation is getting so much of stimulus from external sources that sometimes they are confused.
Yes.
So the point is that parental communication or the teachers in the school, they have to be taking up these issues to, kind of um, the fear if the child is developing, and it has to be, the, the child needs the support there. If there is a confusion, we need to help children in understanding this issue, and every age has a specific communication in this subject. All right. So
Right.
Instead of scolding and punishing the child, which is not going to cause any positive effects, it is easier to communicate in simple language in honest with honest mind. And the parents, I would advise one thing, that look, if you don't know, it's okay. It is okay to say to the child that it's, I don't know, but it is better to get some kind of help from some kind of counseling or some professional child health care clinics or things like that, which is very, very important.
Yes.
If you identify the child is doing, I have seen the masturbatory act in 8 years old.
Hmm.
But like females get uncomfortable about menarche, even the male children have their own issues. They don't realize that why his bladder is full and he's getting erect penis. It's simple. And he doesn't know what is happening. Or maybe first time he ejaculates and if he didn't know, and he doesn't simply understand that. And that is most of the time because of lack of communication and ignorance.
Right.
So that there we are.
Yes, thank you, doctor. You have elaborated that so beautifully. There is another very important psychological thing that comes up in young males and females, wherein in their adolescent or early adolescence age, they do feel attracted to their parent of the opposite gender. And that attraction is not understood, creates a lot of confusion again, and generates a lot of guilt and shame in them, which is unexpressed, ununderstood. And as a consequence, it leads to some issues later on in adulthood. Could you please elaborate on that, Doctor?
It is very interesting. You have asked this question. It's a great question. Sigmund Freud, or earlier psychological concepts, there was something called Oedipus complex and there was something called Electra complex. Now, if you try and read a little bit on that part of the story, it is not difficult to understand. What you just described, that in every family, a father and a daughter, a mother and the son, a kind of attractions are there. However, let me give you in a very simple terms. Every person in terms of psychology is functioning on the basic principle of safety, security, satisfaction, and my gratifications. Like child's need is to get food. Why is he crying? That's the question. Now, therefore, you go one step backwards and try and understand that within the womb of the mother, he is so comfortably, he doesn't have to do anything. It's a warm, little dark, kind of swimming pool where mother eats, he gets food, mother breathes, he gets. What will happen if he remains there for 8 months, 9 months? He will become lazy. Let's put it that way. That if he has to come out of that body, he has to breathe, he has to eat, he has to do everything on his own. And the doctor comes and
Yes.
he clips it, then he is independent physically, not emotionally.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
his basic need at that time is only one: food, survival. Now, therefore, he cries because that is only mode of communication. And whenever, if you notice, the infants cry, everybody is thinking into two things. One, either he has passed urine or potty, or he is hungry. All mothers, young mothers, everyone thinks like this, practically. So what happens is the mother will feed. So obviously the child breastfeeding is done, and therefore it's bound to, it's a source of food for the child which gives him gratification. Now this is a psychological understanding where why boy develops bonding? No. Every child bonds with the mother. That change which you are saying, that attraction of opposite side, it develops little later. Why? Because if you go by what archetypal thought process is the male, and female component. The role of male was providing and protecting, and role of female was nurturing and nourishing.
Yes.
All right. Now, of course, in the current generation, the roles are fused.
Hmm.
So things are becoming different. But by and large, it is the emotional component is presumed to be more on the female gender, and male gender it is considered as intellectual needs or safety needs, security needs. So the man child is going to be attracted towards the mother because she is the one who is providing food. Simple. These are primary instinctual phenomena. While the father is a secured person, he provides the security. But a strict or punitive father creates fear.
Yes.
If you notice, not only the children, the parents also have that issue. बेटे को डांट सकते हैं, बेटी को नहीं डांटेंगे. This is known. These are known socio-cultural patterns. So every house has got these issues, but they overcome once they grow up and they are on their own thought process. They learn. But till then, in early days of it is still the basic gratification of food, protection. These are the issues where the family structure is. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, sir. So, how would you feel that all these understandings or confusions regarding to one's own sexuality and awareness of oneself sexually as one is growing up, when there is a lot of suppression or repression related to that, when one has been scolded or one has been not made understood of what is happening, creates a lot of suppression and repression of these emotions. So, in what way would these affect the child's psyche growing up, and what choices do you think would the child make in adulthood where relationships are concerned, or how does it impact growing up?
True. Let's say that, as I said, that there are few things which are by default. We are all human. It's a species specific behavior. Now, let me put a quote here. The war between intellect and desire is a perpetual battle. It's a never-ending story. There are rights and wrongs and goods and bads. This ambiguity is there, and therefore anxiety is by default.
Yes.
The point is that if I'm responding to the social needs or parental needs because of the fear of being punished, then obviously concepts are going to be there. There are two ways in which one looks. One, one develops the aversion component of it. No, this is not to be done. It is, you will become weak. You will become this, that, and other.
Yes.
And the other one becomes a little bit defiant, where he says, let's find out it's fun. Because in reality, the recreational component starts by the time they reach puberty.
Right.
Now, if it is socially not acceptable, then there are people who would like to do things which is not accepted by society, and they find it quite exciting and enjoying something on sly that I hide and do it. So both aspects are important. First, we should understand that it will affect. Right and wrong concept develops over a period of time till the person independently starts thinking about what right and wrong is. But in my communication, I always say that right and wrong or good and bad is a retrospective analysis.
Yes.
Because you get to know result is only after it happens. So one has to understand patience is the blessing, where you have to have patience, communicate to people, make more of people aware of these realities. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, doctor. So, in the same way, like there are a lot of myths surrounding something as simple as masturbation, wherein
Yes.
people think that one loses one's strength because of the masturbatory processes. This includes for both males and females. Of course, in society, males are more known to masturbate, or it is considered and it is not discussed that openly that females also masturbate. So, doctor, I think it's time to dispel certain myths around it. What do you say?
Interesting, very interesting question again. Uh, how I will communicate to my patients is simple. First, let's
Yes.
take male gender. And I'm rather communicative, at one-to-one level as what is the function of penis. Uh, Try and understand. What is the function of penis? It is a kind of hollow tube which becomes erect, and the function is to pass urine, and function is to pass semen from which is inside to outside. Pure physiological. There is no other function. The question is that it is your inbuilt requirement and need. If, Try and understand the physiological component is very interesting because the process of generating the liquids and controlled by brain, it is constant. The testosterone generation in a man, it is by default. The question is whether more or less is a matter of individuality, but it's there, that is for sure. So these spermatozoa and all those things and copper secretions and prostate gland secretions, that is going to happen. By God's grace, there is a seminal vesicle which stores. But if it is continuously in storage, if there is no exit, then there is a problem. Now that is where the desires become intense, and either when you have sex with your spouse or a sexual partner, it goes in there. If you don't, and if you want to masturbate, it will go into the bathroom. There is no difference because the function of penis is very simple. Likewise, as we say, the man is supposed to be visible in his excitement because there are distinct functions which are different in male and female. Though practically both the functions are, but visibility of erection in men says that he is excited, while female, it is different perceptions because there is no penis like organ, and therefore, unless one is trained to pick up that part, it will not happen. Now, the question which you asked that whether it is good or bad. What is the question? Sorry, repeat once more.
So I was saying that there are a lot of myths regarding masturbation, wherein it is
Right,
believed
sorry,
that loss of semen or loss of
correct.
it
Fluid.
results in weakness. Yeah, fluid results in weakness
So,
and
so
weakens
when
the
I'm
man's
talking,
virility.
correct. So, my question to you is that those who are very strong and powerful, are they not having sex? Does it
Right.
happen that way? No, these are myths. It's a body fluid which is supposed to come out of the body by it, whether you like it or not, it will go out as long as that function is all right, unless there are some interventions which are taken. So, therefore, uh, my argument with the patient, or rather, I would not call an argument, my kind of disputing the belief system is that I tell them, spit. Do you feel weak when you spit? No, I don't. Do you sweat? Yes. Do you feel weak when you sweat? No. You pass urine. Do you feel? No. Then why should you feel if the same fluid is supposed to come out? Why would you feel weak? The myth of masturbation is based on that it's a bad communication. I'm sorry, because there is a lot of literature in different kind of, which is partly the religious trainings and partly social perceptions and things like that, but the biology doesn't change as of today. The question is
Exactly.
that in sexuality there is a, we all make funs and jokes and doubt that 90% of the males they masturbate and 10% lie. There is no question of, because if even in sexual relationship, sorry, sexual relationship, it can be a masturbatory equivalent. It doesn't make sense. There is a difference. So, as far as communication is concerned, first thing is we listen to the client, understand where he is coming from. Don't impose your ideas on sexuality, on right and wrong, on kind of the social perceptions. Anyway, I believe that as the child grows into adulthood, there is a stage which I call defined stage. Everybody goes through
Mm.
this phase. And my parents, are the best parents in life. That is how it begins. Then they
Mm.
say that I doubt they are not in tune with what is happening in my life. And then comes a stage where you say, when they get children, the generation changes. And then say, yeah, my father used to say this.
Yes.
So, it's the value system which are evolving constantly. If you look at the larger picture, sexuality is also very much in the process of understanding social perceptions. The
True.
myths and misconceptions, there are many, not one, especially about masturbation, both in men and women. Everybody has
Yes.
been talking about this part, but not necessarily. It does not have any scientific explanations there. And as far as if you want to make a correct kind of politically correct statement, everything in excess is a poison. If you
Mm.
masturbate once in a while, it is not going to hurt you. But if you masturbate 10 times in a day, then there is a problem. You may not be able to. And that is reality. The question is that, well, we'll talk about this in the other part when we talk on the addictive logic in terms of sexuality. Yeah,
Yes.
please go ahead.
Yes. So, doctor, thank you for that by putting it so simply out there that masturbation is a simple physiological process too, and it need not be either demonized or called as a sin or either deified. Just call it for what it is and understand it for what it is, a healthy process. So, doctor, there's a question that is being raised by Ms. Vandana Hiranandani. According to you, going by this topic, who should be counseled first, the parents or the children or both?
First, parents to understand, and then children. Both of them, the whole family probably will need. See, most of the time, when I take up patient for treatment, it is not only the patient but also the family members. Like
Yes,
if there's when it comes to children, 90% of the time the problem is with parents. The child is not mature enough. If you say, see, again, it comes to my mind that how do you define a child? The new inside the womb it is fetus, then it is infant, then it is young
right,
child. Child, what is the
right,
age up to which you are going to help?
right.
The legal definitions and the psychological terms are different. See, you may be able to vote at 18 years of age. Less than that, you are not permitted. Why? Because you are a child. Hello? The current generation is changing. It is as simple as that. I see all kinds of family disturbances in that situation where they say child custody issues. What happens to the child? In less than 12, mother given option first if he has got no handicaps. Between 12 and 18, what happens? You have to take a consent for both. So legal aspect, the psychological aspects, and social perceptions are different.
Right.
Listen to the child. Listen to the parents, listen to them together. Don't become judge. It is not a role of therapist or a counselor to give advice. The role of a counselor or therapist is to identify the conflict which the family is experiencing and help them to resolve the issues. That's it. Any counselor, yes, I would say that all of them need help. I hope that answers
True.
the question. Yeah.
Yes, doctor, I think that beautifully answers the question where the role of a therapist is ideally to be the conflict resolver or first identify what the conflict is and enable true communication and dialogue to develop between the family members. I think that is a very important aspect of this topic wherein dialogue is very essential. Now, doctor, there is also the issue of sexual abuse in this field, that where as a child it can be different. The understanding of a child, as you said, nowadays in schools there is a great amount of teaching of what is the right touch, what is good touch, what is bad touch, which is fantastic that is happening in society and long due and long overdue. However, I'm sure this does not reach into every part of the country or the world. Child sexual abuse is a known fact across the world today, unfortunately. So, how would you address these issues? Or how would one approach the child, approach the parent? Because this also, in this also, there is a lot of unfortunately blame on the child, on the parents, and a lot of secrecy and a lot of covering up, wherein if the abuser is part of the family member or is a family friend, and it becomes very difficult in addressing the issue. Doctor, could you please elaborate on this? Because this affects the child's growth
Oh, yes.
psychologically, you mentioned.
Yes, for sure. The point is, yes, uh, how would I put it? Socially, the sexual abuse is known at all levels. It is not necessarily only the child abuse, we will talk about that. But sexuality and sex are two different issues. The point is that what is normal, natural, beautiful relationship results and what is fearful, involuntary, kind of abuse which will come, there are two different phenomena. We can talk subsequently sometimes, but for the child, any involuntary, forceful kind of phenomena or something which he cannot understand is it will generate fear. Now, physiological response will also trigger off certain amount of psychological sense of gratification. It is both, and this happens in everyone. The point is that that results into confusional state. Should I or should I not? The fear is, should I tell my parents or not? Threat from the sexual abuser is also there. Now, most of the time, if you realize, this abuse is a result when parents are not there, parents are non available, or somebody whom they trust is given responsibility to take care of the child. That person turns out to be a threat. So, it is not only the physical component which is painful, the emotional pain experienced by the child, and the social pain which is perceived later by the child, all of them are important. The pain experienced by the parents that the child is suffering is one. Two, the socially, array, how can I tell somebody who is so close to me, he is elderly gentleman and he is very nice person. So the question of trust comes, and it's a communication and trust go hand in hand between the children and parents. It is not uncommon. It is. I agree with you that there is lot many patients who become mentally extremely anxious and to the level of having breakdowns with the history of being abused in the childhood. Now, whether it is a male child or a female child, abuse will result into pain. The pain has to be experienced and channelized in his own or her own mind, and different types of defense mechanisms are being used. So it is known. But what about social perceptions? Well, legally,
Hmm.
it's a crime. It is. My point is, it's a crime. All right, let me take a drift on that. Whether it is in adult relationship, of course, child they don't know what is happening to them, so therefore confusion is normal. All right. One side of the child is finding curiosity, another child is learning. So it's a conflict between, the id and the superego issues. Well, we are going drifting. The point is in adult relationship. Do you think that rape it's amounting to sexual abuse?
Yes.
Commonly, people are inhibited in using the language, slangs. And most of the time, people say fuck. Now, fuck is a very interesting word because it was, the history goes back into the World War II, where the definition, it was a forceful, unlawful carnal knowledge. The other very prevalent was that fornication with consent of king. Now, if you notice that, both of them are abuse and both of them are not within the legal framework but for that time. Now you notice that. Do you mean to say that it doesn't exist? It does. It's a part of social evil that we are facing if we are going to call it evil. But I'm not looking at that aspect. I'm looking at the person who is suffering. His mind is disturbed, his thoughts process, his emotions, his inability and weakness of that communication of that threat perception to somebody he trusts. Most of the time, people make that mistakes. Parents, especially, that they don't trust the child, and which I feel very, very unfortunate for the child. It does cause long-term problems. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, sir. Because I have seen children who are abused growing up to get into as adults into further abusive, similar abusive relationships with the opposite gender, not necessarily in the as in marriage or even in relationships. So it is equally so important that, as you put it, that if the child is sexually abused or molested in childhood, that child needs help. Otherwise, that child which does not receive help, the right kind of help, not just the child, I would say even the parents
Yeah.
require help. So equally. So in children, especially who do not receive help, they grow up and these emotions are suppressed and even repressed in them, and they subconsciously choose partners which are likewise abusive, unfortunately. And life kind of, the pattern repeats itself, which even perpetuates, as you can say, in marital rape, which is a very hot topic of conversation today in society. Wherein, are there any laws for marital rape, for punishment to happen, for help for the woman to be received? Because it's also physical abuse that takes place. And even in this situation, the woman, out of a sense of shame and guilt, is unable to even share what she is going through behind closed doors in the bedroom with her spouse. Could you elaborate on this part also, sir?
Well, I might sound very cynical. There are a lot of laws not implemented.
Correct.
Likewise, this is one of the laws. See, primarily our laws were generated long back in 40s and 50s. The time has changed, the laws have not. Because once a law is passed, it is then you have to make amendments. It's a long process in which the changes will take place, if at all it does take place. But what do we do? Most of the time, people are blaming somebody else, or parents, or relatives, or somebody. No, I'm not blaming anybody. Let me tell you that when something bad is happening, it is the human responsibility that we should try and help. When children come to me, when say take example as you said, marital rape. The question is, it has to be communicated. And you know what, you made a very interesting statement that the problems are there subsequently, but there are two types. There is one type which is responding to the fear and becoming surrendering, because that is also
Yes.
a part of social training,
Hmm.
right? And the
Yes.
other part, which are defiant. See, try and understand. Everything in life is supposed to be balanced. So if this can be the response, even this can be response. Like there are enough number of, as of today, see, institution of marriage, I might sound harsh again, that do you think that one is married just because the registrar of law, who unknown person puts a signature and a stamp, therefore you are married? No. That an unknown Brahman, whom you don't even remember the name after 5 years of marriage, who is, asking you to go around a fire and he certifies, therefore you are married, or it is the relationship between the two, commitment, whatever, if it is there, which originates out of, see, love and lust is the part of marriage and relationships. So therefore, there are both kinds of people you will see. The one who are surrendering, who are having problems, and one who are being defiant and the husband having problems. The question is, it is not somebody to blame. It is. I see this question. Yes, practically anybody who needs any kind of help. पहले के जमाने में it used to be a wise person. When there was any difficulty, I could go to some old person with experience and communicate with this person without shame and guilt. And as far as sexuality is concerned, I remember the sayings of Diogenes. It says that when Sikandar came and he said that ask whatever you ask, I'll give. And Diogenes very plainly asked that move out between the sun and your shadow. He was a great philosopher. And I will use Hindi here. Most of the people do understand Hindi. That उतार दे अपने अहंकार के अलंकारों को और लेट जा इस पाषाण शिला पे नग्न होकर. नग्नता
Beautiful.
नहीं, निर्दोषता प्रकट होगी. It is a very interesting and very good. I am remembering these things which I read long back. That if we look at sexuality in innocence and natural phenomena, then it is beautiful. And if you look at the perception as deviant, then it becomes pathological. You mentioned in the beginning only the physiologically and pathologically what is the difference.
Yes.
If there is increase in intensity, frequency, and duration, that is what is defined as pathology. Whatever, if there is a blood pressure, if there is a high blood pressure, there is a problem. If there is a low blood pressure, everybody has got blood pressure.
Yes.
Heart rate, increase in heart rate, reduction of heart rate, everybody has got heart rate. Breathing, increase in more than certain levels, so your oxygen saturation, if it is too much, there is a problem, too little, there is a problem. So, likewise, one of the functions in mind is sexuality. If there is too much or too little, well, there are problems. It is how you are looking at it. Are you looking at it? Everything is good. So, therefore, we have to understand this part. If we are looking as a role of therapist or a counselor, the perception is different. If I am looking at as parent, it is different. As a child, it is different. Or the person who is suffering for is different. So we have to keep it open. That look, there are different ways in people are looking, and that is reality. The question is the in any social circumstances there are norms, customs, in a social circumstances. The purpose of that law was to protect that group of people or the role of that person towards the society. In return for that protection was logical. What you should do, well, once upon a time, people used to be governed in that fashion.
Yes.
But as of today, people have become intelligent enough. They will ask me, it's like I'll show it. This, do you see this? I wear a neck, ornament. And my friend Rajan, he just asked me this question that you are wearing a nice bracelet. Now it's very, very nice of him to say that. And I told him, this is my Mangal Sutra. And he started laughing. And I said, yeah, why? Is it a discriminatory statement that I cannot wear Mangal Sutra, only ladies has to wear my Mangal? No. So it's a matter of social perceptions. Right and wrong, well, we are not judges. The legal component we keep out of it. Okay, go ahead, please.
Right, doctor. So that brings us to even different sexualities like homosexuality, same preference of same sex partners. There's a lot of myths, a lot of, what do you say, prejudice against them. Could you please elaborate on that to dispel myths in that front?
Yeah, okay. Well, in early days of medical training, the normals and abnormals in terms of legality was different. I attended one of your earlier sessions where people, the doctors have said that, it is taught in our forensic medicines as perversions. Yeah, but that book was written in 1956. The law has come, which is based on certain other constitutions of other countries, but it was indigenous in terms of what should be happening here. Any kind of sexual deviation, as I said, if it is intensity, duration, and frequency is high, then there is an issue because it doesn't fit within the concept of law. However, the $1 million question is, say, take example homosexuality we talked about. I'm happy that you used a word same-sex partner preference. I use that word
Yes.
because it is non-discriminatory. It is not about men or women. There is a whole lot of work, social work, psychological, mental health work, which is being done in our country, yes, everywhere in the world, in terms of is it the variance? Is it deviant? Is it, or it is part of natural? Now, I might sound very ancient and spiritual, but when the species generated, it was not only the humans. Deva, Danava, Rakshasa, Gandhara, Kinnara, Sarpa, all of them were there. Manusya was there, but all other species are also described in at least literature. So the question is that why would I say the whole, the fear or the discrimination starts when it is us and them. It's a social perception again that I'm right, you are not. I do it this way, you do it this way. Well, the definition which came earlier that it is against the law of nature, therefore they were labeled as abnormal. Not true. The question is what is natural? The law of nature is based on a concept which was ancient. A man and woman is complementary because of what? Is it a sexual functions which we are defining? That the woman has to bear the children of the man. Not only in terms of the sexual, again, let me tell you, reproductive sex will not have problems. The recreational part of the sexuality generates problems. The question is that if it is a need of that person, and if he is comfortable doing what he is doing, why anybody is bothered? The social perception becomes threatening to that person if he is doing something to hurt, harm somebody else, which is within the framework of law. Like example, last year before, I think in last couple of years at least, there was a section 377 Indian Penal Code Act, and there it was clearly defined that consensual and with consent, if two grown-up adult intelligent people decide to have sex, which will not considered as a crime. So if there is a discrimination, it is coming for what? It is because I am afraid. It based on my feeling. I have worked fortunately with Hamsafar Trust, which is doing a lot of work in men having sex with men. So there's nothing wrong. It's a good thing. If the moment we accept, there are no issues. And I believe that there are a lot of beautiful people, great, creative, intellectuals, which have their sexual preferences. So who am I to judge what is right and wrong? If you are going by legal, that if deliberately he is not trying to hurt anybody, he has got all the rights which anybody else should have. However, the society still it is, and in that perception also, I am sometimes confused myself. That in ancient past it was acceptable. There was no special favors or disfavors or punishment for. If you
Yes.
see temples which are in India, and there are a lot of temples like Konarak or uh, you know uh, the recent one near Bombay in Maharashtra, Khajuraho and Elephanta. There are beautiful depiction of sexuality, which should be a part of understanding for every person. It's there,
Absolutely right.
and therefore it was accepted at that time, and it was no problem. Now people are afraid. Oh, these people are going to do this, and this. That is where the problem starts. In terms of mental
Absolutely.
illness, well, you have to decide. If the person is comfortable, what we call ego syntonic, he is not going to come to help, ask for help. It is only when he is ego dystonic that he seek help. And that is the time it is my role to help him out as much as I can. Sorry, go ahead.
That's right. That's right, Doctor. Thank you very much for sharing on this very important social question, wherein rightly put, the problem is not the same sex partner preference. The problem arises from the conflicts which are a consequent to that, whether in the individual himself or herself or in the family around them. So
Right.
that is what needs resolution and resolving. Thank you, Doctor. Another very, it will be the last question of today's session. That is a very untouched topic is geriatric sex. It is a myth that women above menopause who are menopausal or men who are say above 60 should not feel sexual urges is the social perception of the same. How can they feel like that? How can that happen? But there are a lot of women who are menopausal and men who are above 60 who natural sexual urges are still existent in them, but they do not have a platform or a forum, or they have an inability to share it out, to speak it out, because, yes, because of social perceptions, they are faced with discrimination. Could you please elaborate on that front, Doctor?
Again, I will feel very cynical about this. Now, let me tell you, sexuality is normal, beautiful, natural. There is nothing right or wrong about it. Everything is right or wrong that you will get to know only after that. But it's the matter of perception. See, again, as I am repeating, that reproductive sex is not a question. The recreational component which can result into conflicts. My point to you is that 90% of the time, people, when, say a female going into menopause, that means, the psychological perception is also going to work on it. That, oh my God, my reproductive age is over and therefore I'm not useful to my man. The recreational component is still there. The sexuality is not only meant for only reproduction. There is a whole lot of it for having a great amount of, bodily, mentally, socially, spiritually, everything. It's a beautiful kind of experience. The question still is that if I think that, look, okay, I am old and I'm not going to get it, then there is a problem. I mean, people say that, well, after age of 60, you cannot have sex. Oh, bullshit. I have patients who are, they want to get married at the age of 70. You have seen in social circumstances that the wife may be 30 years old, but the husband is old enough, or the wife is old and the young husband in
Yes.
social existence, because the majority don't follow the pattern, therefore everybody wants to follow what majority is saying is right. Not necessarily. You can have sex. In fact, I think that those who have lived active sexual life will have a longer sexual life. These are the myths and misconceptions which are not easy to remove from the social consciousness. The point is that because every time they were saying, ki, yeah, but the important part of the story is that, look, okay, after menopause, there are certain changes. That level of hormones are reduced and therefore there are difficulties. In fact, there is a clinical condition called dyspareunia, that because of lack of secretion in the vaginal mucosa, the act of sexual intercourse is a little more difficult. But then there are ways in which to deal with, and that is the responsibility of both to communicate that I have difficulty, seek help. There is nothing wrong. If it can be managed, it can be managed. If medicines are required, medicines are to be given, to be given. It's the quality of life which one is living. If you are happy, healthy, normal, there is no rule in sexuality. There is only one rule, that there is no rule. If two people voluntarily decide to have sex with each other, both of them are responsible. The problem becomes when it starts accountability. We'll discuss this probably next time, where multi-partner
Yes.
sex problems, emotional problems faced in sexuality between husband and wife, between, men and women, between man and man, everything. The emotional
Yes.
components are more or less same. The joke is this: old people. I'm sorry, I'm using these terms, but they grow old, and they say oral sex is our lifestyle. So you say, why do you say that? So in the bed you are sleeping facing, no, facing away from each other, and say, fuck off. Sorry. You can edit if you want. Both of them are saying the same thing because they did not. The partner did not do what the other person wants. In fact, my normal advice for people who seek help for that purpose, that you should have sex 3 times. Why not? First time is to please your partner, second time for both of you, and third time to please yourself. Have it. What's your problem? Well, I don't get erection immediately after sex. I said that is natural, normal, physiological. Wait for half an hour. Jaldi kya hai? So it's the matter of perception, patience. It's a beautiful experience. Sexuality, there's nothing wrong in it. And it's not necessarily the sex means only genital sex. You're just holding hands with somebody and you feel beautiful. That is sexuality. It is in the mind. Giving a hug, there is a release of oxytocin, and it can happen in a mother who is holding the child. That is also love. That is sexuality.
Yes. Yes.
But that may be more on the spiritual side when we talk about it.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. And on that note, we could end this session. I think this session has helped in addressing a huge amount of issues which are left unaddressed, unspoken, not discussed about in society. And I feel a lot of myths have been dispelled here. And yes, the takeaway from this session is that the most important part is communication. Communication, sharing what one is going through can help in resolving issues. And sexuality also happens between the ears, not just between the legs. On that note, thank you, Dr. Jerajani. Thank you.
My pleasure.